Hey everyone, on today's episode, as you can hear behind me, we're going to travel back in time to the infamous World War II era South Pacific. South Pacific is a musical by Richard Rodgers, Oscar Hammerstein II, and Joshua Logan. The plot centers on a World War II era American nurse in the South Pacific who falls for a French plantation owner, but then struggles to accept his mixed race children. Also, a Marine lieutenant's romance with a Tonkinese woman who faces social scrutiny. Rodgers and Hammerstein believed that they could write a musical that would be financially successful and at the same time send a strong progressive message on racism. Now, in order to understand the musical and its origins, we kind of have to go back to the beginning. James A. Michener's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, Tales of the South Pacific, would become the basis for the script and locations in the musical. Although James could have avoided military service in World War II, being a birthright Quaker, he decided to enlist in the U.S. Navy in October of 1942. He would survive a plane crash in New Caledonia. The near-death experience motivated him to write fiction, and he began listening to the stories told by soldiers. One journey took him to the Treasury Islands, where he would discover an unpleasant village called Bali High, populated by scrawny residents and only one pig. On a plantation on the island of Espiritu Santo, he met a woman named Bloody Mary. She was small, almost toothless, her face stained with red Betelgeuse. Punctuated with profanity learned from GIs, she complained endlessly to Michener about the French colonial government, which refused to allow her and her other Tonkinese to return to their native Vietnam. Now, the novel basically comprises 19 stories, each standing independently but revolving around the preparation for an American military operation to dislodge the Japanese from a nearby island. The stories are thematically linked in pairs, meaning the first and final stories are reflective, the second and 18th involve battle, the third and 17th involve preparation for battle, and so on. Now, the 10th story at the center is not paired with any other. This story, Fodala, was one that attracted Rodgers and Hammerstein's attention for its potential to be converted into a stage musical. Fodala, set in part on the island of Bali High, focuses on the romance between a young Tonkinese woman, Liat, and one of the Americans, Marine Lieutenant Joe Cable, a Princeton graduate and scion of a wealthy Philadelphia mainline family. Another source of the musical is the 8th story, entitled Our Heroine, which tells of the romance between Navy nurse Nellie Forbush from rural Arkansas and a wealthy, sophisticated planter, Frenchman Emile Debec. Additional elements of South Pacific have their genesis in others of Michener's 19 tales. One introduces the character Bloody Mary, another tells of a British spy hidden on the Japanese-controlled island who relays information about Japanese movements to Allied forces by radio. Several of the stories involve the Seabee, Luther Billis, who in the musical would be used for both comic relief and to tie together episodes involving otherwise unconnected characters. After their two successful musicals, Oklahoma and Carousel, as well as their risky disappointment, Allegro, Rodgers and Hammerstein were determined to achieve another hit. Using the stories in Michener's novel, they decided not to include a ballet, as in their earlier works, feeling that the realism of the setting would not support one. Hammerstein spent months studying the other stories and focused his attention on Our Heroine, the tale of the romance between Nellie and Emile. It was conventional at that time that if one love story in a musical was serious, the other would be more comedic. However, in this case, both were serious and focused on racial prejudice. In May of 1948, Rodgers received a telephone call from Edwin Lester of the Los Angeles Civic Light Opera. Now, Lester had signed former Metropolitan Opera star Ezio Pinza for $25,000 to star in a new show, Mr. Ambassador. In a very daring move, since the show had not been written and never would be, Lester basically convinced Hammerstein to take over Ezio's contract and cast him in South Pacific. With Pinza's signing, Rodgers and Hammerstein decided to make him the lead male role, which at the time was very unusual on Broadway for the romantic lead to be an older male. For the role of Nellie, Rogers sought Mary Martin. Now, Martin was reluctant to sing opposite Pinza's powerful voice. However, Rogers assured her that he would see to it that the two never sang at the same time, a promise he mostly kept. Although Nellie and Emil were already fully developed characters in Mishner's stories, during the creation of South Pacific, Rodgers and Hammerstein and Logan began to adapt the roles specifically to the talents of Martin and Pinza and to tailor the music for their voices. A song that would become one of the most talked about in South Pacific came after Martin showering one day after rehearsals. She came up with the idea for a scene in which she would shampoo her hair on stage. This gave rise to I'm Gonna Wash That Man Right Out of My Hair, a song that would never have otherwise entered the show had it not been for Martin's creativeness. After hearing the song I'm in Love with a Wonderful Guy, Martin sang the final 26 words as intended with a single breath and fell off her piano bench. Rogers, stunned by the event and gazing down at her, said, "That's exactly what I want. Never do it differently. We must feel that you couldn't squeeze out another sound." Rehearsals will begin in February of 1949 with Myron McCormick as the comedic Luther Billis, William Tabbert as Joseph Cable, Betta St. John as Leot, and Juanita Hall as Bloody Mary. Now, with no formal chorus, each of the nurses and Seabees was given a name, and in the case of the men, $50 to equip themselves with what clothing they felt their characters would wear from the military surplus shops which lined West 42nd Street. With no major difficulties during the 4 weeks of rehearsal in New York, the run-through for friends and professional associates on a bare stage was met with some of the most enthusiastic applause. Now, the musical would open on Broadway at the Majestic Theater in April of 1949. The advance ticket sales totaled $400,000, and an additional $700,000 in sales was made soon after the opening. In April 1950, a national tour would begin in Cleveland, running for 5 years. And fun fact, for the 48,000 tickets available in Cleveland, 250,000 requests were submitted, causing the box office to close for 3 weeks just to process each and every one of them. Now, the show would open in London at the Theatre Royal in November of 1951, starring Mary Martin, Muriel Smith, Wilbur Evans, and Sean Connery. The first Australian production opened in September of 1952 at His Majesty's Theatre in Melbourne, playing for 10 months and 333 performances, before touring in Sydney, Brisbane, and Adelaide. The production would see 2 Broadway revivals, the first at Lincoln Center in 1967, starring Florence Henderson, who is best known for playing Carol Brady in the ABC sitcom The Brady Bunch. The second at the New York City Opera, starring Puerto Rican operatic bass baritone Justino Diaz. A 1988 West End revival would open at the Prince of Wales Theatre, starring British sitcom Pennies from Heaven actress Gemma Craven and Canadian operatic tenor Emile Belcourt. Timed to celebrate the centenary of Richard Rodgers' birth, a new production with slight revisions to the book and score would open at the Royal National Theatre in December of 2001, starring now producing artistic director of the Theatre Raleigh, Lauren Kennedy, and Australian bass baritone singer Philip Quast. In August of 2007, a British touring production of South Pacific opened at the Blackpool Grand Theatre, starring Helena Blackman and Dave Willits. This production was most noted for its staging of the overture, which charted Nellie's journey from Little Rock, Arkansas to the South Pacific. A third Broadway revival opened in April of 2008 at Lincoln Center's Vivian Beaumont Theatre, starring Kelly O'Hara, Brazilian operatic baritone singer Paulo Schott, Hairspray's Link Larkin, Matthew Morrison, Moulin Rouge's MC Danny Burstein, and Hawaiian jazz singer Loretta Sayer. A U.S. national tour would begin at the Golden Gate Theatre in San Francisco in September of 2009, starring American operatic baritone Rod Gilfrey and Broadway's Bright Star leading lady, Carmen Cusack. A 2011 transfer to the Barbican Theatre in the West End would star Paulo Schott, singer-actress Samantha Womack, and Scottish actor and television personality Alex Ferns. A second West End revival would open at the Chichester Festival Theatre in 2021, starring British singer-actress Gina Beck, Julian Ovenden, and Filipino musical theater film actress Joanna Ample. Now, as in most successful musicals, a film by 20th Century Fox would also be made in 1958. The movie was the third highest grossing film in the U.S. during the 1950s. And a made-for-television film would also be released in 2001, starring Glenn Close and Harry Connick Jr. A 2005 concert version was filmed at Carnegie Hall, starring American country music star Reba McEntire, Brian Stokes Mitchell, Alec Baldwin, and Lillias White. South Pacific is considered to be one of the greatest musicals of all time. The show has had a profound influence on American musical theater, and its songs continue to be performed and enjoyed by audiences around the world. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to today's video. If you enjoyed this, please comment on what you liked or disliked. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want to see other videos like this, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. And until next time, that's a wrap.